Well, I got up pretty late. I think I went to bed pretty late too. When did I go to bed? 2? I hate doing that, but I just can't get out of the habit these days. I guess I woke up about an hour ago. I lay there looking at news about the Omicron variant. And while they say that there's no data that it's really dangerous yet, it's scary. Then I was reading on a website about where to get PCR tests in Japan if I ever wanted to take a trip home. And that was like really depressing because they're all like $200 and $300. I know this doesn't sound like a lot of money to working people, but I haven't been working in a really long time. And my students, they take a lot of breaks. And so I'm always extremely broke. As a matter of fact, even when I was working in Japan, I was usually kind of broke. Now, some of you might say, Carl, didn't you know that? Didn't you know how expensive it is in Japan? I used to live in Korea, and I was never rich, but I always had a good amount of money in my pocket and in my account, or at least enough to get by and live comfortably. And when I used to visit Japan, I thought it was expensive, but once I moved here, I discovered that there are amazing places to shop and to buy clothes and things so that it's much cheaper than even living in New York. But when you're not working, none of that happens, right? So anyway, I was lying here this morning on my crazy concoction of a bed, which is a conglomeration of sofa cushions wrapped in special valve plastic bags that enable them to be airtight because I have an old apartment and I have a tatami, which is a woven bamboo mat, and they're beautiful in Japan. But mine is covered with plastic, and my bed is concocted the way it is because tatami can get infestations of bed bugs, and it's why every convenience store and every pharmacy in Japan has a whole plethora of anti-critter remedies, tools, and recourse to fight such things. And so I haven't been bothered with them in like maybe forever, but I do think that I was attacked when I first moved here a few years ago. Anyway, I was lying there. I guess I described it to you because I was considering showing it to you, but you'll cry when you see it, but it's really comfortable. I have a thermarest on top of it, a bunch of blankets, and then these special sheets which also protect me from anything possibly happening. I mean, I saw something in my foyer last night where I sometimes sit, like floating around, and I was like, what the hell is that? It's like, it's the dead of winter here, and you still find living things that shouldn't be around. It's weird. Japan is semi-tropical. Anyway, I was lying there and I was reading and so on. I guess I was reading for about an hour, and then I hear these guys outside mumbling and talking, and I thought it was the usual thing. People tend to hang out outside my house and talk, and it's annoying because you can hear everything. Because in Japan, unless you're the one out of, or maybe the 2 or 3 out of 100 people in a neighborhood who has some sort of a yard, most people live right near the street. I have a little veranda which puts about 6 feet between the edge of my house and the street between us, but it's still like people are in your front yard. You know, it's nothing like where I grew up, where there was like 60 to 100 feet between the house and the street, and people just sounded like this outside. But here it's like that, and I'm lying there listening to this, and I got up, and it was kind of like that scene in As Good as It Gets where he goes, son of a bitch, you know, because they're knocking on his door. And this is what I find. I find these new political posters, which this guy's commenting about with his wife. The scenery here, the way people mope by quite often. I mean, sometimes you see people in suits and dressed to the nines, but just that wall, which is a common thing in Japan, really ugly barriers around houses, and then the way old people are like shuffling around. I just sometimes have to shake it out of my head that I didn't come to Russia to die. It's just such a sad scene. But anyway, more political posters, right? And you know, this is the thing about life. If you don't talk to people, you can create any kind of anger and frustration in your head. But I opened the window, and just for the hell of it, to get out the stress, I said, you know, does that man get paid for that? I wanted to know if the crazy residents here who allow that shit on their houses get paid for it. I mean, you couldn't pay me to put up political posters, even of the people I like. That's just the worst eye pollution in the category of dog shit on the street. Don't put faces out people's windows. That's fucking crazy, right? But this is Japan, and as charming as it is in many ways, it's also fucking crazy. So that's what I get. But at least she's remotely passable to look at. I'm not talking about like pretty or sexy. I'm just talking about like her expression. Okay, she looks at least remotely friendly. But I still look like somebody's peeping in my windows, right? But Japan likes peeps, right? So the thing is, I started talking to these two old men putting the thing up, and then my heart rate went down. I didn't feel like two weirdos were standing outside my veranda and just talking to annoy the person inside, which is often the feeling that I get. And they were like, they were like, and I was just thinking, I got to find out if people get paid for that. Not because I want to get paid. I just want to know if they're doing that without permission. Because if they are, I'm tearing them down. Because since I first moved in here, I didn't want to look at that, right? I mean, it's creepy. It's fucking creepy, right? Pardon my language. I'm just letting it all hang out today, you know? See, this is what I mean by the sad neighbors. So, like, when I lived in Korea, I never saw that. There were buses that drove the elderly people downtown, right? And downtown is, for me and you, 3 minutes away. But for that woman, it's a half hour to an hour. You see how slow she's walking. She's got a walker. I often think if I could speak Japanese well, I would knock on doors and say, "Do you need groceries? I'm buying for the neighborhood," because it's the saddest thing. You see all these people on their way to the hunt, you know, at the local convenience store or the supermarket, and it's absolutely depressingly sad. Anyway, when the guy started talking to me, things livened up, and it became funny, and I got out my translator, and I said to them in pretty good Japanese, because I can imitate voices, right? People have been telling me this for years, and people who hear my Koreans ask me if I'm Korean often. And so I asked them in Japanese, like, but they couldn't hear me. I said it again and again. They came closer to the veranda. And then they finally got that I'm asking them, do those people get paid for that? And then, I mean, I wasn't going to say, do they pay for it? What kind of lunatic living in a neighborhood like this would be paying to have political ads put up? That's another thing that always cracks me up, right? The worst parts of town are where you see the political ads posted up on people's houses, and it's like, yeah, what's that person doing for you? You know, like, and where do you get the extra money to be bullshitting about politics when you live in that thing? So, no, I know this sounds terrible. A lot of the houses around me are actually nice, but people back home wouldn't want to live in them. I mean, even though they're neat and clean and they have some sort of interesting, weird design, like some corniche of fake bricks and nice facades, and they're made of all the modern materials. They're still boxes, right? They're boxes that are this far from the street and maybe twice the distance from one another. And basically they're all garages. The whole front of most Japanese modern affordable houses is a garage, and the people live over it, and they have like a door right beside it under the same carport that houses the vehicle, and then all their belongings are right there, bicycles and umbrellas. And not everybody lives this way. I mean, Japan has some of the most interesting houses you'll ever see, but they're all interesting in a way that a young kid would be like, "Ooh, Dad, it would be cool. Can we live there?" They're not the homes that an adult wants from the West. They look like fancy military depots with maybe a nice paint job, or a lot of them have garage door fronts, right? Because you can see how the hurricanes have been blowing my hair around since I came here. Not. So I don't know what it is. Is it fear of criminals? Is it just that they want to live in a fortress? Anyway, the guy started laughing, and they basically told me that no, the neighbors allow them to put those up, right? And so I was trying to ask them, is that a right winger or a left winger? I was like, midiri, migi, demo, hidari. I forgot to say demo, so I was saying left, right to them, and they were looking at me like this. I don't know if demo is right, but anyway, just life here is so weird. At least I get distracted from my worries and my lack of progress in finding a job. Now I'm going to make some breakfast and something hot to drink. It's times like this when you miss the insanely large, commodious, beautiful, and solid looking houses and plots of land that you grew up among on Long Island. But that's as far as it goes, because then you imagine worrying about road rage. Well, we didn't have that where I grew up, but I just expected things were just getting worse all the time. I think about riding the train into Manhattan, and that was usually pleasant. I could strike up a conversation with just about anybody, but just as often there were people talking super loud on the way home at night. Long Islanders are like animals. They fight. Not all of them, but enough so that you're like, shit, that never happens in Korea or Japan, or I imagine in any European countries or Latin American countries, unless they're there to kidnap you or, take over the government in a junta, which we now have. Have a nice day.